So let's get started. I know most of you. I'm Rabbi Micah Streifer, and I'm the director of La Asok. I'm really excited to study this morning with Rabbi Judith Siegal, who's an old friend of mine. We grew up together in New Orleans and went to Jacob's Camp together, and have known each other for a long time. She's a wonderful teacher and is the rabbi at Temple Judea in Coral Gables, Florida. So welcome to those who are joining, who've been part of this community. Welcome to, looks like we have at least one new person joining us from Coral Gables. Glad you're here today. And let me just encourage you to have your cameras on if at all possible so that we can see each other, have a conversation. We do intend this as a discussion. So if you have any thoughts, feel free to put them into the chat. Or if it's okay with you, Rabbi Siegal, I didn't ask you ahead of time, if people raise their hands, either you'll see them, I'll see them, we can unmute and have a bit of a discussion here. So with that, I'll turn things right over to Rabbi Judith Siegal. And Rabbi Siegal, maybe you can lead us in the blessing for study and then take it away.
Sure, I'd be honored to, and welcome everybody. It's so nice to see you, and really thank you, Rabbi Streifer, for inviting me. I really am honored. I'm a big fan of Rabbi Streifer's podcast, 7-Minute Torah. I think it's just phenomenal and recommend it to everyone to listen. I listen every single week, and I have since the beginning, and I'm a supporter, and I love it, love it, love it. I think it's just phenomenal, and all the great work you're doing, Rabbi Streifer. I'm grateful for the phenomenal work you're doing and the forward thinking of that you are using to get your words of Torah out. So, okay, so good afternoon for those of you here in Miami and on the East Coast, and great to see you. I know Paula and Natalie are in Miami, Coral Gables. I don't know if anybody else is, but it's great to see you all. And so I want to tell you, we'll start with the words, the blessing first, and then I'll tell you all about the rabbi and what we're going to learn today. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. I'm here a big amen. Amen. Blessed are you, Adonai our God, ruler of the universe, who makes us holy by commanding us to engage in words of Torah. Amen. And so a few years ago, I started learning about this rabbi in the Warsaw Ghetto. And I think you should know about me that that Holocaust studies is very important to me. It's a very big part of my rabbinate. And actually, I started teaching about the Holocaust, like even in high school, I was already teaching about the Holocaust. I'm not sure how I got into that, except that my mom was very involved in Holocaust education. And I found it fascinating. And I started reading, actually in high school, I really started reading about the Holocaust, like every book I could get my hands on. And that has continued through my life. I really love Holocaust stories, not because of any of the negatives, but honestly, because of the just like impossible situations that people found themselves in, and the incredible heroes, the incredible, I'll call them miracles, and survivors. Like the stories out of that specific period of time and specific set of circumstances, to me, are just kind of mind-boggling and also inspiring. The resistance that was shown for all different kinds in different kinds of ways really inspires me. So I started learning about this rabbi who was in the Warsaw Ghetto a few years ago. And I did a presentation on it, a class on it. And actually, Natalie, I wonder, you may have been at that class, Natalie Siegal. So maybe some of this will come back to you, I don't know. But I started studying him then and then continued. And during COVID, I kind of came back to him because there were certain things, not to be so I guess morose about it, but there were certain things about COVID that sort of reminded me a little bit of some of the things that actually the Rebbe was dealing with. This was a Hasidic rabbi, the Piaseczno rabbi. It's very hard to say. His name is very hard to say, Rabbi Kalonymus Kalman Shapira, the Piaseczno Rebbe. He wrote a book called The Sacred Fire. If you want to get the book, it's a very beautiful book of like in-depth Torah study. It's his drashos, it's his drashot on every Torah portion and holidays, etc., that he wrote while he was in the Warsaw Ghetto. So you're going to learn a little bit about him, his background, the circumstances he was facing. And to me, the real underlying miracle of his life is that he witnessed and actually experienced so many tragedies, like beyond what most human beings ever experience. Losing his wife, his son, his daughter-in-law, and like pretty much his entire community, and himself eventually going, well, you'll hear what happens to him at the end. It's not good. And, all of these horrible, horrible circumstances in his life. And yet you'll see, I mean, some of his writings are hopeful, are beautiful. He continued teaching Torah. He continued celebrating Jewish holidays. He celebrated Sukkot like the day after his son died. I mean, it's just kind of, I guess, I'll take it as inspiration. Now, you can look at it, as in a different way. I'm also a social worker before I was a rabbi, and you could say that there's some dysfunction perhaps, but people find different ways to cope in very difficult circumstances. And truth be told, I do think that we are experiencing of course, not the same thing as the Holocaust right now. Of course not. I'm not saying that. But we are experiencing a very dark time for the Jewish people right now with the war in Israel ever since the attack on October 7th, Hamas's attack on Israel that was unprovoked, and the continuing, war and violence that has followed. All of the deaths, both of Israelis and Palestinians, and the continued story of the hostages who remain, as well as the tremendous rise in anti-Semitism, which I don't have to elaborate on, So with all of that darkness, we still have to find continuity, perseverance, and life. So I think in those ways, this rabbi's writings can still be really helpful and influential for us and inspiring. So with that, I have a short presentation for you, and here goes. We're gonna, there are 2 short videos. I think the longest one is like 4 minutes, and then we're gonna look at some text. I would love to have conversation on here. However, I also have a lot to present in 22 minutes. So let me get right to it. Here we go. You'll let me know if you can't hear or see, but I think you should be able to see right now a slide that says Rabbi Kalonymus Kalman Shapira, the Piaseczno Rebbe of Warsaw Ghetto. And here is a video that's going to tell you a little bit about his life. Now, again, you'll have to trust me a little bit that it starts pretty dark because his life was very dark, but there's hope at the end, I promise. All right, here we go. By the way, the melody, the song that is kind of playing behind this video was written for him, which I think is really meaningful as well. So here you go. Here we go. Can you hear? Good. Aish Kodesh is the book that's the title of the book of his writings. So I'm going to tell you now a little bit about the Rebbe, and we'll learn a little bit about him, and we'll also have time to look at some of his teachings. And again, I know that it's sort of a dark beginning. It is a very dark beginning because actually his life was very dark. And here I can stop sharing for a moment so we can see each other's faces. Hi, Charlotte. Charlotte's from Miami too. Thanks for joining us. We're learning about the Piaseczno Rebbe, who is the rabbi. He's also known, he has many names, by the way. He was also known as the Warsaw Ghetto Rebbe. He was a Hasidic Rebbe, so they're often called Rebbe instead of Rabbi. Okay, so I'm just going to give you a little brief introduction to his life, a little bit of detail of his life, and then we'll look at some of his text. Rabbi Shapira, also known as Shapira, was born in Grodzic, Poland in 1889. He was the son of a leading Hasidic rabbi at the time. And his father, Elimelech, died when he was 3 years old. So he started his life in tragedy and loss. But despite that loss, he continued to lead a life of spiritual purpose. And he became the rabbi of a small town named Piaseczno, spreading Hasidic teachings in a time when secularization was very common in Poland. He would later move to Warsaw, setting up one of the largest yeshivot in the city and settling down with his wife, Rachel Chaya Miriam. They had 2 children together. Poland then was invaded by the Nazis during World War II, and his son died in the initial bombing of Warsaw, which was then taken over. The Warsaw Ghetto, of course, was the largest of its kind, used to imprison and persecute Jews from all over Poland. And it was a place that they could be corralled and deported to concentration camps and were. Later on, his own daughter would be deported. Rabbi Shapiro lived in this ghetto, and from the documents that he wrote down, he saw the faith of his people was faltering, understandably. Despite his own personal suffering and the dire consequences of the people under his care, Rabbi Shapiro forged on, offering guidance and wisdom to the people who were tired and as harrowed as he was. He continued to write and to compile literature during this time, and his most famous work, Eish Kodesh, which is also called Holy Fire in English and is available in English, was a compilation of his various speeches and discourses, words that he used to inspire and give hope. When the Warsaw Ghetto uprising later happened and was then crushed, he was taken to a work camp, and after a period of time as a factory worker, he was killed alongside many others on the 3rd of November, 1943. But that doesn't really end his story, actually. The rest of his story is fascinating, and we're going to hear more about it because I guess the question you might want to ask is, how do we have his writings? So, do any of you know by any chance? I bet maybe some of you have studied this or learned about it. Don't worry, I'll tell you. But if you know, if anybody knows, it's a really fascinating story, and we're going to get there in a minute. Okay, so okay, let's go to. I'm going to share some slides and share some of his teachings. Okay, so one of his teachings is just this idea this idea of resistance, and many of you may have studied this in learning about the Holocaust before. There are different kinds of resistance. There's spiritual resistance, which is really the type of resistance that this rabbi really exemplified. It included doing Jewish rituals even at a time when it was not only illegal to do them, but you could get killed for doing those very things. Lighting Shabbat candles, praying, studying Torah were actually illegal in the Warsaw Ghetto, and he continued not only to do them in secret, but also encouraging his congregation, the people, to do so as well. Of course, there's active or armed resistance, which were like the partisans and the actual ghetto, Warsaw Ghetto uprising, and even in the camp. So most of his writing was not done in a camp; it was done in the Warsaw Ghetto. But even in the camps, there are examples. In the ghetto, there's an example of baking matzah. There's a beautiful photo. I'm sorry I don't have it. I have it in a book that I didn't bring with me, but there's a really beautiful photo of people baking matzah in the Warsaw Ghetto, and they have big smiles on their faces. And it's just the most amazing picture of what spiritual resistance really is. Because what was that smile about for them? It was like, look at what we're able to do. Now, how absurd is it to think of baking matzah, which, by the way, I don't even like on a good day, to be honest. But that they were baking matzah, making matzah in a time when that was, you could lose your life for doing so. And what did that mean? It meant that they were celebrating our people's freedom in a time when that was not allowed. That's real spiritual resistance. And he was kind of the, I guess, the best model of that. So I want to show you this. This is just like a little map of the Warsaw Ghetto. I'm not going, in another class, I would go more into, the Warsaw Ghetto, what it was and where it was. I've been there to visit, maybe many of you have. But just to get an idea, it was like, what happened was it was a small area of Warsaw, and all the Jews were corralled into this very small area. So they were living in horrendous conditions. You'll see some of those, and I do want to just give you a little heads up that, it's not, I don't think these are terribly graphic pictures, but you definitely get the idea of how deplorable the conditions were in the Warsaw Ghetto. Again, not a camp, but the ghetto. People were starving, people were dying on the street, and from starvation and from disease and overcrowding. So this is just a very short video, a little bit more. And pardon the, by the way, these sources. I know in the first video, I would not normally use, he, the pronoun he for God, but they do in these sources, just, so that's, they're not gender sensitive. And these are more traditional sources. So they're going to use like he for God, which again, I would not normally do. So I'm apologizing for them. Anyway, here we go. Here's another little video about the Piaseczno Rebbe, and then we'll go to some of his texts. These are actual photos of him, and actual footage from the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum. I know it's hard to see, but that's actually his writing in Hebrew. That is actually one of the milk cans that his documents were found in. Okay. Okay, let's go to the text so that now you've gotten an idea of who he was and the times he was living in and sort of what he was facing and dealing with, I think. So to me, it would already be inspiring for someone who was just in that time period, continuing to study Torah and write and teach. But for him, as you heard personally, he also had very significant losses. And so, hold on. Hopefully you'll get to see them. Okay. I'm skipping a few slides that have just some history of his life. Okay, so this is the amazing part about what happened with his actual teachings that he discovered by Polish construction workers in 1952. Okay, while clearing rubble after the war, these tin milk cans were discovered with Hebrew manuscripts. Now, does this ring a bell for anybody? No? Okay. Where they lay dormant for 10 years. This scholar, Duvdevani, was looking for them, found them, and they were then published in Israel in the 1960s. There was this group called the Oneg Shabbat, which was a group in the Warsaw Ghetto that had specifically, purposefully hidden these documents during the time of the ghetto. They put them in those milk jugs. They knew that they were not, that those writings would not survive otherwise, and they were found. It's an amazing story, and you can actually see those jugs at Yad Vashem. When you go to Yad Vashem in Israel, the Holocaust Museum there, I think there are 10 of them. There might be more, and you can see them there. So one piece of so that again, to me, it's like another miracle that his writings continued. But so one of his writings, he writes, if a person sustains himself in difficult times only with his belief in imminent salvation, then his experience of agony and suffering remain unmitigated, and it is difficult for him to bear when, God forbid, salvation is delayed. This is not the case if, together with the belief in salvation, he also bows his head, saying, He is God, you are God, and will do what's best in your eyes. This actually softens and absorbs the bitterest feelings and lessens the sting of pain at what is happening. A person is then able to bear more, and his faith has more power to boost his spirits, even when, God forbid, salvation does not come as soon as he had hoped. So what do you think? Here's the one question we'll have time for you to respond to. What do you think was the source of his hope, the source of his ability to go on? And while you're thinking, you can see that's one of the jugs that was saved. And I'll stop sharing so I can see you all. At least you got to see that one little taste of his teaching. What do you think from that, just from that piece? And again, if you're not ready to answer, I have an answer ready for you because our time is short. So anybody want to comment? I'll tell you what I think. I've been studying him for a while, and it's interesting because, so much of his hope came from the faith that God has some kind of plan out there. We don't understand it. We don't know it. We don't know what that plan is, and we're not sure exactly how that's going to work. And it's not happening fast enough for him in that moment. And I'll say, I think even in this moment in the world, it's not happening fast enough. If there is a plan, I'm not aware of it. And I hope we're going to get somewhere better soon. But I'm not saying that's not a part of my theology, by the way, but his theology clearly states, I think he states it in that little piece that I just shared of text, that he thinks that God must be watching out for us, that God is looking over us and somehow has a plan that is beyond our understanding. And I do think that there's something meaningful in that, and meaningful in the amount of faith that he places in God, that hopefully, things will get better, not like my theology says, because we will make things better. That is what I believe. But, for him, it's that God will make things better. And meanwhile, we just have to do the best we can to go forward. Yes. Please, Rabbi Streifer, you're welcome to also jump in.
Sure. I was just saying, well, I'll just read what I said. I said, I don't know if I believe in a plan per se, but I find it really moving, the idea that I was actually studying this with my chavruta this morning, a Hasidic text that says, something similar, like everything is really for good. God is intending all the bad for good. And I said, I don't know if I really believe that, but I do believe that good can come out of the bad, that we can learn from it, we can grow from it, that there's always some meaning to be made in the hard things that are happening.
Beautiful. I want to share one more teaching, just like in the last 3 minutes, because we only have a few, but I want to make sure you see this one more. And I do encourage you, by the way, if this interests you at all, to go ahead and get the book. I mean, it's a book, you can get used copies of it. It's called Sacred Fire by Rabbi Kalonymus Kalman Shapira, and it's in English, and it's definitely very readable. It's just each Torah, it's commentary on the Torah from this rabbi, his sermons from the Warsaw Ghetto. It's just, to me, kind of miraculous. So here's one more of his teachings to bring us a little hope in some pretty dark times that we're living through as well. Blessed is God. I have the honor of requesting the esteemed, he put this in the jar. This was the note that was found in the jar that was found, okay, in the 1950s. Okay, blessed is God. I have the honor of requesting the esteemed individual or institution that finds my enclosed writings, Torah insights on the weekly readings for the years 5700, 5701, 5702, to please exert themselves to send them to the land of Israel, to the following address. And he gives the address, Tel Aviv, Palestine. He gives a name, Tel Aviv, Palestine. That's what it was called at the time. Please also send the enclosed letter. When the Blessed One will show mercy, and I and the remaining Jews survive the war, please return all materials to me or to the Warsaw Rabbinate for Kalonymus, and may God have mercy upon us, the remnant of Israel in every place, and rescue us and sustain us and save us in the blink of an eye. With deep, heartfelt gratitude, Kalonymus. I mean, I know it's poignant and sad, but it also is, like, to me, it's also hopeful. His principal teachings are that, the importance of joy, even in difficult circumstances, and the power of the moment and making the right choice in each moment, as he had to do in the most difficult of life circumstances. So that's all we have time for today. This 30 minutes goes so fast, but I really, really appreciate the opportunity, Rabbi Streifer, to share this, because it's actually a passion of mine. I love learning about this man and his deep faith and his hope in the darkest of times. And I will say that one of the pieces of inspiration for me is that if this man could have hope and continue to teach Torah and to observe Jewish ritual and life in that dark time, all the more so can we. Thank you.
I want to say thank you to Rabbi Judith Siegal for this really fascinating and moving discussion. Next week, we will be studying with Rabbi Chaya Bender of Wilmington, North Carolina, also a wonderful teacher. So I invite you all back, even those from Miami, come back next week, join us again. Have a great rest of your weekend and early Shabbat Shalom.